Hi, I'm Marta. Thanks for stopping by. Today I'm focusing on how you can use a very limited, very dramatic color palette, just black and white, for any occasion. I'm exploring different products and techniques to get different looks and feelings, and I'm even going to make a black and white rainbow card, so be sure to stick around to see how I manage that. Let's get started. I always think of black and white as a serious, elegant color combination, and maybe the most obvious use is for a sympathy card. I started by grabbing a big open floral stamp from Memory Box that comes with the sympathy sentiment right in the set. But even when I position the flowers so that I'll be stamping off the edge, the long sentiment doesn't fit. It's easy to get more versatility from your stamps by performing some simple stamp surgery and using sharp scissors to cut them apart. When you do it, it's a good idea to stretch the stamp so that you can lower the risk of cutting into that raised portion. And it's also a good idea to cut on an angle rather than straight up and down. Even better, if there's space, cut it like a little arrow. This will help when you want to put them back together like a puzzle piece to stamp in the original configuration. And if you're not comfortable with stamp surgery, don't worry. You can achieve the same look with some masking. Just be sure to clean your stamp really well between the stamping. Now I could glue the panel directly to my black card base, or I could pop the whole thing up. But one way to add some interest to a monochrome card is to create a difference in your dimension. I used the coordinating die to cut out the flowers, glued the rest of the panel directly to the card base, and then I popped up the flowers with some foam tape. Next, I left out some of the pieces of the panel. This is unexpected and it adds more contrast and visual interest without impacting the serious feeling of the card. I finished by coloring in the flower centers and adding some clear glitter glue on the stamens. Another occasion that works well with black and white is New Year's Eve. I'm using a background stamp from Pinkfresh Studio that's meant to be used with some colors, but I think we can change the look a bit by leaving the colors out and making these starbursts look like fireworks. I start by prepping my cardstock with my embossing bag. This will help make sure that the embossing powder sticks only where the stamping is. I ink up the stamp with my Wow embossing ink and then I do it again, just to be sure that I got a good, juicy impression. I grab my black Twinkle embossing powder. This is black powder that has silver glitter in it for some sparkle, which is perfect for New Year's Eve. Next, I grabbed a square die to trim down my panel, and I'm able to choose the area that works best within the square before running it through my die cutting machine. To finish this one off, I stamped a small text sentiment from Hutson, and now I'm adding some black iridescent pearls from Lucy's Little Things. Another idea for making black and white cards is to tie them into things that are already black and white. I placed this rectangle trio stencil by MFT Stamps onto the right end of my cardstock, and I held it in place with some magnets on my mini Make Art station. Using this underneath the stencil gives me a grid which will help me with spacing and straightness of my black keys. I find that ink blending with black can be tricky. Catherine's Midnight ink and VersaFine Onyx ink are both a little sticky or something, so I got out my Distress Oxide ink in black soot and I blended it through the stencil with an iCrafter brush dauber. Now, the thing about pianos is that the spacing between the keys is, well, key. So when I moved the stencil down, I placed it right at the other end. It's important to have that extra space between the groupings of black keys. I'm getting a very different chalky finish with the Oxide ink, and again this is another way to get a different look with a black and white palette. I've made this design in the past with black cardstock rectangles or even stamping, but this stencil makes it really quick and easy. I turn the panel and stamp a simple thank you from a Jillian Vance design. I used the Oxide ink again so that it would all tie together. I popped the panel up on a white card base for a minimalist look. No embellishments, nothing else. Another thing that's black and white is a penguin, so I thought it would be fun to see if I could make a kid's birthday card. This MFT penguin set is retired, but I've linked a similar one below, along with all of my supplies. Because the stamp for the penguin body is separate from the stamp for the beak and feet, it's better to die cut this one first and stamp second. Otherwise, you might stamp the feet in the wrong place and it won't die cut properly. Of course, that also allows you to stamp the beak and feet in a different color, but this time I'm using black. To create a background, I grabbed this painted stripes stamp from Catherine Pooler and I stamped it horizontally. And then I turned my cardstock and stamped it again to create a kind of checked pattern. I trimmed the background panel down and I cut a circle from the center. I stamped some little stars from the set to act as birthday confetti, and I stamped a little sentiment strip and popped it up just under the circle focal area. To add to the fun, I added a mini action wobbler to the back of my penguin so this guy can dance at the party. I finished with Stickles on the stars in the sentiment strip to add some sparkle. Now how about a Christmas card? Black and white gives a very elegant and dramatic look for a holiday card, and I'm going to use these Birch pressed snowflake dies. I don't know how it happened, but I somehow ended up with 2 of the top layer and 1 of the bottom, instead of having 1 in the middle, so I can really only use 2 layers, but that's perfect for today. I've cut 1 base already from white cardstock, and now I'm cutting 1 of each from some white glitter cardstock. To add some interest to the black background, I'm going to do one of my recent favorite tricks and use these Essential Squares dies from Hutson to create a negative frame. I tape the 2 squares together, and once they come through the die cutting machine, I get a black frame and a solid square that will have a little negative white frame between them. I piece together the 2 layers of the snowflake die cuts, and I put the pieces I don't use right into the pocket where I keep the dies for a future project. I used liquid glue for all of this, but if you prefer, you could cut intricate dies like this with an adhesive sheet on the back so that they act more like stickers. To finish this off, I added a dewdrop from Lucy's Little Things. It has a bit of iridescence and adds a perfect festive touch. Next up, Wedding, Anniversary, and Valentine. A love card. I'm starting with this flower garden cover plate from Hero Arts. I'm going to cut it from this Concord & 9th black foil cardstock. That will give me a shiny, classy finish, which adds to the elegant feel. I've created an A2 top folding card by adding a panel of cardstock weight vellum to a white backer. I used vellum glue to attach it, and it's nearly invisible on the back of the card. Again, I used liquid glue to attach my black die cut, and again, you could use an adhesive sheet if you prefer. You can see that I actually tore one of the leaves, but this is easily fixed by just gluing it in place. I put an acrylic block on top to hold everything in place while the glue dries. For my sentiment, I cut and stacked up 3 layers of a big love die from a Jillian Vance design. I've got it held on an acrylic block with a loop of purple tape. This will make it easier for me to put some Nouveau crystal drops all over the top of the die cut word. This will add dimension and shine, and while it's wet, I'm going to sprinkle some iridescent glitter on top. This card is simple, but by using vellum, foil, and glitter, there's a ton of interest. And this card could easily be made in reverse. Use the white foil cardstock for the cover plate, and then black for the love word. That crystal glazed glitter trick looks amazing on black cardstock. And finally, my black and white rainbow card. I love this rainbow felt die from Hutson because it has a solid shadow die, and each of the arcs in the rainbow is separate, which gives so much flexibility. But I've taped them together to cut them from the black background. This gives me my rainbow outline. Again, I use liquid glue on the back, and I glue it to my white card base. Next, I'm cutting the arcs again, this time from white cardstock that does have an adhesive sheet on the back. And then I pressed ink into each one using my Catherine Pooler mini inks. No, I'm not cheating, I promise. First, I temporarily put them back into the black outline on the card, and I trimmed them down to fit. No, really, I'm not cheating. And yes, I should have been a little more careful because I ended up getting a little ink on the white card because there was ink on the release paper. So don't make my mistake if you do something similar. Now I'm adding what I think is a very appropriate sentiment for a card with a rainbow that's missing its colors. Miss You from Bouquet of Love from Altenew. Now remember, because the colorful arcs have release paper on the back, they're like stickers. I'm going to include them inside the card for the recipient to be able to stick them in. Another interactive design that will bring a smile to a friend. And see, I really wasn't cheating. Black and white is definitely dramatic, and it gives a high contrast, high impact look. But if you're craving color, click right here to head over to Inkhill Revival, where Kerri is sharing unexpected ways to add color to your projects, whatever your style. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.